Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Connor Jung and I'm a Loyola junior, and now we're going to go over part 2 of the reading comprehension questions. So let's actually go over what my partner Ethan said in the first module. In the first module, he talked about what the reading comprehension test was and how it consists of 62 questions and you had 25 minutes to do it. He also went over the main idea questions, where the questions are about the main idea on what happens in the passage, and tips to help you do well in those type of questions. So over this module, we're going to go over word and context questions and fact questions and the strategies to go over it. So make sure you have everything set up. Your HSPT book right here, some notebook, pencils, paper, water, and some snacks and erasers. So what are word and context questions? Word and context questions are questions that want you to figure out the meaning of the word based on context clues given throughout the passage. So formats of these questions include: the word as underlined and used in the passage most nearly means what? And you have the choices. Which of the following gives an example of blank? Which of the following definitions most closely fits? So basically, some personal tips I want to share with you is to remove the word from the passage, the underlined word from the passage, and replace it with the options given in the multiple choice. Choose the one that makes the best or most sense, and cross out any choices that have nothing to do with the passage or do not make any sense at all. Or you can try it the other way around, where you don't look at the multiple choices and plug in your own word. And if your own word matches one of the context clues, if your own word matches one of the choices, pick that certain answer. Also, you want to underline certain clues or sentences that hint to the definition of words. So context clues, basically, before and after the sentence, which usually hint to the word. So now, open your book up to page 202, and we're going to try the question on page 203. A, handsome, B, foolish, C, rash, and D, brave. So last module, you already read the passage, but let's review the passage again. Shrek, the popular children's movie about an unlikely hero, Shrek the ogre, and an equally unlikely heroine, the lovely Princess Fiona, turns the traditional concept of the fairy tale on its head. Traditional fairy tales present the reader with a passive, innocent, and weak heroine who requires rescuing by her stalwart hero. Notice that the word is underlined, so you don't have to go looking for the word because it's underlined. By contrast, Shrek offers a heroine who burps, eats like a horse, and thanks to her knowledge of martial arts, actually saves her own rescuer at one point. One can only attribute this change in acceptable heroine characteristics to social changes affecting women in the U.S. in the 1950s. So, as we look over the choices, let's plug in our choices, our multiple choices. So A, let's plug in A. Traditional fairy tales present the reader with a passive, innocent, and weak heroine who requires rescuing by her handsome hero. So that could be work, so we can definitely keep that choice. But we want to choose the one that's more closely appropriate. So let's look at the other choices. Traditional fairy tales present the reader with a passive, innocent, and weak heroine who requires rescuing by her foolish hero. Now this choice we cannot use because what do you associate with the word hero? You don't associate the word foolish with the word hero. And also we have context clues that we don't need a foolish hero to help save a passive, innocent, and weak heroine. So that choice will not work. Rash, which basically means foolish, we can also get rid of rash because foolish and rash are basically synonyms. And if you eliminate foolish, you can definitely eliminate rash. So our last choice is brave. Traditional fairy tales present the reader with a passive, innocent, and weak heroine who requires rescuing by her brave hero. Now this choice is the correct answer. Choice D is the correct answer because brave most associates with the word passive, innocent, and weak. You want a brave hero instead of a handsome hero because brave hero helps save an innocent and weak heroine. So you want to associate, given the context clues, you want to use the word that most appropriately fixes the answer. So basically, when solving these type of questions, you want to use verbal skills and synonyms and look for context clues and read sentences above and below so you get a full understanding of how the word is used. So let's take a look at another example on page 206. And question 4. Let's read the passage together. The word jazz is another use of the words that have experienced significant change over time. Originally, people used the word jazz to refer to activities that took place in the naughtier sections of exciting but dangerous towns like St. Louis and New Orleans, places that pride themselves on their ability to provide immoral yet fun things to do. Later, however, the word came to apply to one activity in particular, the hot music that sprang up from these areas. Musicians like Charlie Parker, Louis Armstrong, and Miles Davis owed their fame and their livelihood to jazz. Still later, the words came to be used in phrases such as all that jazz, meaning stuff. So the question asks, which of the following definitions most closely fits the word jazz? A, the article does not state. B, music. C, drugs. D, violence. So we're going to look at the passage and look at context clues that hint to what the definition of the word is. So the specific line that tells you explicitly what the definition of jazz is. Later, however, the word came to apply to one activity in particular, the hot music that sprang up from these areas. So looking at the choices, which word closely relates to that? And the answer choice is B, music, because it explicitly says music is the hot music that sprang up from these areas. So the answer is B. So you want to look at the context clues before and after the sentence that hint to the definition of the word. To practice more word and context questions, look on page 206 and try questions 5 and 6. And if you have any trouble on these questions, the explanation for the answers are on page 221. So now let's go over fact questions. Fact questions are facts in the reading passage that are explicitly stated. And my personal tips for these is to underline important parts of the passage, especially conjunction/contrasting words such as but, because, although, however, because they usually explain important information. When reading these fact questions passages, you do not need to plug in outside information or outside facts, even if you know about it. All the information is stated in the passage. So, for example, let's say the passage is about World War II and you know a lot about World War II. You don't want to use any of that outside information because that outside information does not help you in the passage, and all the answers are inside the passage. All right. So, formats of these questions include: when did the action described in the passage take place? Why did so-and-so do such and such? What is the setting of this reading passage? What did the protagonist of the passage not do? And all but which of the following facts are true? So let's look at the example on page 203. So we already read the passage about Shrek. So Shrek rejects which traditional elements? Now the easiest way to go about these questions is to find context clues. But let's look at our choices. A weak heroine and her stalwart hero. B, an unlikely hero and heroine. C, a heroine who burps and knows martial arts. Or D, a passive heroine and an innocent hero. So the answer is explicitly stated in the passage. Traditional fairy tales present the reader with a passive, innocent, and weak heroine who requires rescuing by her stalwart hero. By contrast, Shrek offers a heroine who burps, eats like a horse, and thanks to her knowledge of martial arts, actually saves her own, rescues her own point. So, because it's explicitly stated in the passage, the answer is A, a weak heroine and stalwart hero. And we know about this because it says explicitly in the passage. So these fact questions aren't too hard, they're simple. All you need to do is find the information in the passage and underline what you think is important. And especially underline by contrast. Notice how that's a conjunction where it's a challenging conjunction, so where it goes against, like although and however. So let's look at another question. Let's look at the example on page 207 and question 7. So let's read the passage together. Author Stephen King loves to play inside jokes on the readers. From his first short stories to his made-for-TV adaptations of his own novels, The Shining, the generalizations ring true. Take, for example, King's early novel Christine, a story about a haunted car who gives her owner popularity and long life in return for souls. The car, a vehicle of death, possesses a radio that only plays the music of dead musicians like Buddy Holly or the Big Bopper, or musicians whose name mentions death like the Grateful Dead. Later in his miniseries adaptations on The Shining, King provides a ghostly band playing mute music for a bunch of revelers. The band leader is none other than Gage, the little boy killed by a truck in King's pet cemetery, now grown up and evil. These are grisly jokes, indeed yet amusing the avid King reader to discover. So let's look at the question and what it's asking. Which of the following bands does the car's radio play? So after underlining important information, and you will come across the line where it tells you the answer. The car, a vehicle of death, possesses a radio that only plays the music of dead musicians like Buddy Holly or the Big Bopper, or musicians who mention death like the Grateful Dead. So the answer already tells you Which of the following bands does car radio play? Only plays the music of dead musicians like Buddy Holly or the Big Bopper. So the answer choice is B, because it explicitly states that in the passage. So notice how all these fact questions are really simple because it's stated in the passage and you don't have to use your brain as much because it's stated explicitly in the passage. Now, I want you guys to try questions 8 and 9 on page 207 through 208, and if you have trouble or need explanations, the answer key is on page 222. Now, for more practice on reading comprehension, especially these 4 types of questions, check out this following link. And like my partner said, Ethan Baggio, he said, if you struggle with reading books, practice reading newspapers and articles to improve your speed of reading and help you answer these questions faster. Then here are some final tips for the HSPT in general. You want to get a good night's sleep, healthy breakfast, and do not spend all night studying. So study beforehand so you're prepared for the test. And do not overthink these reading comprehension questions because they are actually really simple. You will do just fine because these questions are really simple. And if you struggle with a certain problem, do not spend so much time on it because you can just skip it and come back to it because you don't want to spend a lot of time on a certain question because time is important. So yeah, thank you. And my name is Connor Jung, and these are the word and context questions and fact questions and strategies to go over it.